Hello, 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 and welcome back to another episode of Opinion or Opportunity. I am your host, Don Gringo. So today I have a controversial topic, one that I wasn't expected, but I'm glad I have it. We're going to talk about Black America and racism. Yes, you heard it, and yes, I'm white, and I get it. But I have two gentlemen, Tony and Will, which I won't give their last names up. They want to kind of remain a little anonymous because of the fact that, yeah, it's a controversial topic, right? So we're going to get into it. They both come from very different backgrounds, more of a revolutionary activist type background, but in their later years have ended up in a much, much different spot than they ever imagined. So we're going to talk about racism. We're going to talk about Black America, and they're actually going to cite some sources and show some books and try to educate me and anyone watching. So I appreciate you taking the time as always, and thank you so much. Let's get into it. So I'm glad to have you finally both. But I know we talked previous, and we were going to talk about ground rules. I know you guys are like no ground rules, but let's not fool ourselves. There is the perception issue that we have to worry about here when it comes to me. Um, I'm not saying I'm asking for permission or nothing, but we're going to have a polite conversation. And
Yeah,
Tone's over there.
yeah. But Tone was just saying that because he didn't want you to have to feel like you had to hold back on any questions or comments. We don't want you to have to hold back or feel like you're delving into an area. If you delve into an area that we wish not to discuss, like you said earlier,
Yeah.
we just say, well, we'll talk about that at some other date.
Well, I'm not so much going to worry about the history of it as so much we're going to need to worry about the racism part of it because we're going to be talking, Black history. So um, I just want to make sure that I don't offend anybody and offend anybody
Hmm.
watching it. So
Yeah.
so
Okay.
I want to make sure we're having that discussion prior to actually delving into this. So with that being said, why don't we start off with one of you two introducing yourselves and um, don't have to go through the whole rigmarole of what you do for work or anything like that. We'll get into that some other time maybe, but let's get into who you are and where you came from and what led you to where you are today, which I'm going to turn around and say is you guys are both now conservative Black men, right? But you didn't start out there by far,
Right.
by far. So we're
No.
going to talk about Black history, which is what you discussed that we should be discussing and why that changed your frame of mind and the thing led you down the path it did. So why don't we start this? Let's do introductions. We'll go William, you go first.
Hmm. Okay. All right. My name is William. Some people know me as Ikemba. In the movements that I've been involved in, they know me by my African name of Ikemba. And my what we call our slave name or our traditional name is William Crowley, Crowley. And oh, I'm sorry, I put my hand in front of
It's
the
okay.
screen. Now, are we live or is this
No,
this
we're
gonna be
recording right
pre-recorded and
now. Yeah,
edited?
just go with it.
Okay,
You
okay.
can edit
So
this,
anyway,
right?
I can
like
edit
you
this.
went
I'm not,
through the
listen,
introduction,
we are going to
myself and
do this
Tony.
as raw as we can. As raw as we can, okay? Because
Okay,
if I
I'm
edit
better,
this, I
even
don't
better.
want people thinking I'm trying to make this
Okay.
look better or sound better than the truth that you guys want to talk
Yeah,
about.
exactly. That's the way I like it. That's the way we like it. Okay, so anyway, myself and Tone come from different persuasions or different ideologies in the community. But what we found is though, even though the ideologies are different, it's pretty much the same liberal victimology or victim stance uh, viewpoints that we had. It's like the finger pointed outward that everybody else is the problem, primarily European or white society is the
Well,
ultimate
before we
enemy.
get there, though, before we get there, you didn't reference your background, so just
Yeah, I'm
reference
going to go.
your.
I'll go into that. Okay, yeah.
Okay,
So, but I'm just saying our common backgrounds.
okay,
So I started out just in a small town. Tony, I mean, well, I'll let Tony deal with that himself. I started out in a small town called Excelsior Springs, Missouri. Born in 1961 there, and left there in 1975 to the great industrious Los Angeles, California, and that's where I had a rude or very, yeah, I guess you would say an enlightened awakening because at the time I was extremely impressed by what I saw of the black community there, coming from a small um, white. And we usually refer to white people as Europeans, okay? You know, in our movement.
Right. Right.
Okay, so I came from a small white European community, which everybody got along, and I didn't never have the racial problems that I faced or that we talked about when I moved to California, in Los Angeles in particular.
Okay,
Now I remember
we're gonna stop.
1975.
So let's stop there for a second. So you were
Okay,
the
okay.
organization was what organization? The Black Panthers, right?
No, no, the Huru movement, which
The
is the
Huru movement.
extension
Okay.
of the Black, yeah, and which they essentially took over where the Black Panther Party left off.
Okay, so we're gonna stop there because we're not gonna delve into that real quick. Now, Tony, your background. How did you start off? Because you're in the same boat. You're now a conservative black man, and it's not normal for today. But you didn't start out that way either.
No, actually, I was born and raised in a little small town, Gary, Indiana, which is right outside of Chicago. So Chicago to Gary was like Tampa to St. Pete almost. Um, and there I, went to school, didn't have too many dealings with white folk, or I didn't have too many dealings with white people. I went to predominantly all black schools, all coming up, public schools, from first grade, second grade, all the way up to my sophomore year in high school. Um, there, my mom moved us from Maryland. I'm sorry, from Gary, Indiana to Maryland, a little town called Laurel, Maryland. And when I enrolled in high school there, I was a junior. That would be my junior year in high school. And you talk about culture shock. I never saw so many white people in one condensed area like I had seen in Laurel, Maryland.
Okay,
So,
so right here, because you guys, I want to stop right here and ask you both a question, and I want you both to
mhm,
individually address this. Okay, so
mhm,
two totally separate backgrounds, right, so far, right? Two totally opposite ends of the world. One ended up in L.A. One ended up on the East Coast, right? You got
mhm,
one that was in predominantly a white culture. You got one that was predominantly in a black culture. So let me start with William because you started this conversation off with your background. So
Mhm.
you said you weren't affected by racism as people see it today or as people are preaching it today, correct?
Or even back then, because we from a little isolated community, and pretty much the blacks and the whites, even though it was what they call it de facto segregation in the '60s. De facto segregation, even though we lived in our community, they lived in their own community, but we went to school together. There wasn't no, I didn't attend the segregated schools or anything like that. We went to school together, and some of my best friends were white.
Okay, so the
So,
culture shock in LA was totally different for you, right?
yes, it was. It was because I went from a predominantly white community to LA, which had, I mean, I come from a community, a mixed community or white community with one high school. When I went to LA, inner city LA at the time in 1975 had probably 15 all black high schools. I didn't even see a white person hardly for my high school years.
Okay, so now Tony, now you come from a totally different background. So now we're talking. You hardly ever saw anybody until you moved out to Maryland that was from a white culture. So, and you
right,
you you specifically called it a culture shock, right? So
right.
so
Me too.
it,
Mine was culture shock
right.
too.
No, yours was culture shock too. But I'm just trying
Right.
now. I want people who are watching this because I want them to understand this is not me being ignorant. I want you guys to talk about it. But I want people to understand that when we talk and having this conversation, it's coming from intelligent people who are all talking, and it's not just me, doing this. You guys are really coming from opposite ends of the spectrum, but in later in life, finding yourself in a similar spot, not the same, but a similar spot. So, Tony, talk to me about the culture shock. What was it like for you? Because he talked about a wild change from a small town and going to LA. So, what was it like for you when you finally saw, as you put it, so many white people in one place?
Yeah, I mean, it was a culture shock. I mean, just the same, but just the way of living, the way they talked, you know what I'm saying? Just it was different. Everything they did was it was a different culture. So it was it took a lot of getting used to. Not to say that, I was racist in such a way, but it just took a lot of getting used to, as far as going from having absolutely no white friends to having about after my junior year in high school having about maybe 6 or 7, you know.
So,
Uh,
it's a shock, but I don't want to say racism, but you're probably going to sit there and say, probably would agree, it's more biases because of your upbringing and the culture that grew up in, right? You're kind of biased to the way you were raised. It doesn't mean it was bad. It just that's what you experienced, correct?
well, yeah, and I really didn't experience a whole heck of a lot of racism uh, until later on
Okay,
in, in,
so
in my military.
with that being said, and you're speaking right now, because I'm gonna get back to William on this. This is gonna be great because we're gonna get into Black history, and you're gonna talk about your experiences.
African, yeah.
I want you both, in your own way, to define racism. Now, you can define it one of two ways. You can make it a one description, or as I probably would want to look at it, is racism as it's spoken about when we were all kids and younger, right? To modern racism, because that's
Okay,
really where we're getting at when we talk about Black history, because there was a large paradigm shift over a small period of time, right? From the
right,
60s till today, when we're literally talking like 60 years,
right.
right? So
And
let's describe racism and as far as how you feel the definition should be.
well, what I always felt it was about was a bias, being biased to one's own race, own culture. So, uh, me being a black person saying, okay, or saying it was race, I would describe it as somebody being biased.
Okay.
Somebody that was biased because that was what racism was to me. Somebody being biased towards, against another race.
Right.
Uh, Now, when it came to being prejudiced, and bigotry, that was something different. I don't like you just because, what I'm saying, I think that you don't like me, so I don't like you, prejudice. But
So let me ask you
racism
a question.
was bias.
By your definition standard, I'm going to assume that you feel currently that modern racism is been confused and twisted between what racism and in your mind what prejudice should be. It's now been lumped sum together, correct?
Right. I mean, and honestly, brutally thinking about it, everybody's racist. Everybody's racist in this country and in the world. How I feel about it,
Right.
because there's not one person who doesn't go home and pillow talk to their significant other or to their friends to say, man, this cracker or this particular nigger or whatever, however you want to say it and put it, there's nobody that's gonna be not like that.
Okay.
And so when you say racist, everybody's racist. And by my definition of it, I'm saying somebody that's biased in their opinion about someone else.
So let me ask you a question, because we got to take that one step further, and I'm going to give William his turn to describe racism as far as he sees it and whatnot. So when you're doing it, and you're saying everyone is racist, does that make everyone bad?
No, no,
So
not at
how
all.
how do you come to terms with that? If you honestly believe that by your definition everyone's racist, then how did you learn to deal with that? Because we're talking modern racism. We're teaching younger generations, when you hear the word racism, that it's 100% bad, like it's violence, right? It's racism in itself doesn't mean violence, but it's what people are taught. So how did you come to terms in your own mind with everyone's racist, but it's okay?
How one treats another, and there And there's I think that's even in the Bible when Jesus was, and I think it's in the book of Matthew when Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he says, he's talking about, treat one as you would like to be treated, or as if you would have them treat you. And what he's saying there, I think, in my own interpretation, I think what he's saying is that, when you treat somebody as you would want them to treat you, I'm going to look at a man and judge a man by his actions and how he treats me. I don't care what you do. I don't care what's been said about you. What I care about is your actions and your actions towards me. What you're doing. Actions speak louder than words.
Okay, William,
That's
your
why I
turn.
do it.
Define racism for you.
I hate the term. First of all, I think the term that people use to play victim, because like Tony said, I believe we're all racist. I don't believe it. I know we are. We all everybody in this world probably has a racist notion in their body. If you look at another race and you prejudge them, I guess more so in a negative way, then that's considered racism. Now, let me just say more on that. I attended what they call a conference against racism in Berkeley, California in 1991. And I was with the Uhuru movement at the time. And we essentially labeled it that. And we said, we're going to rid ourselves of that term because it's a very ambiguous term that doesn't really scientifically identify the crisis of any particular people. It's just trying to play the blame game. So we actually ridded ourselves of that term. And I didn't even become familiar with that term until I moved to Los Angeles from the small town of Excelsior Springs, where, we didn't even use the word racism. If we did, it was, just in a very casual way, where it became a more of a scientific approach in California, I guess, because it was more prevalent. It was more useful for people to use it to justify their own weaknesses. So, for instance, we say, Black people being targeted by the police. Well, my question would be, okay, Black people being targeted by the police, did we bring that on ourselves? There's so much crime in our communities that when the police come in our community, they're going to have to be on their guard because there's so much crime in the communities. And who's committing that crime? Us.
I'm gonna stop you there for a quick second, because this is, there would be some people that would say that, again, that was a governmental thing, and how, the white people
COINTELPRO. Go ahead.
I mean, I know you're laughing, but there's a lot of people out there that would be of the African American and white people that would agree today. Because I got to admit, watching the paradigm shift on this, especially during the riots and whatnot, that have you, we can't sit there and say that, even though it's happening in the Black communities, that it's all Black people. And it's a lot of crazy white people out there doing the same shit with them. And I'm not trying to be vulgar, but that's exactly what it is. So, I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of people that would say it's still the white man's fault for creating the ghettos and bringing in crack, and they were the ones pushing it into the Black society. I mean, seriously.
Okay, let me say.
But let me stop you right there. Let me stop you right there, because you were saying, they were the ones who were pushing it into the community, but that's just like a young female and a guy. When she gets pregnant, whose fault is it? Is it the guy for pushing, himself on her, or is it her fault for opening her legs? So at the end of the day, you have to look at it and say, you know what? They might have taken advantage of the situation, but at the end, it's our fault for falling for it hook, line, and sinker. We were the ones who opened up our community. If our community was strong enough, then we wouldn't have opened, and we would have had some type of community organization to say, no, we don't want this in our community. And we would have fought against that, but we didn't. We just let it happen. So who's really, when you look at it at the end of the day, who's really the person that's at fault?
So,
William?
Yeah. And so we come up with these fanciful terms of COINTELPRO, and then the biggest drug pusher in our community, the U.S. government. But as Tony said, which I agree with, they can put all the drugs in their community they want to. If we're taking it, then we're the fools for taking it. So we can't say to blame, they put it in our community, so I had to take it. No, they may have put it in the community. It's financially rewarding for them. It wasn't financially rewarding for us. But if you go back historically in African history, Black history, we have made a lot of extreme financial mistakes.
Okay,
in our
well, we're gonna
past.
get into Black history here in a
Yeah,
second, but I got
I
one.
know, but
No,
go
no, no,
ahead.
no.
Okay.
I know you're saying we're gonna get there. I want you to explain history because you're gonna touch on all these subjects. I know you are. We're gonna. I
Yeah.
know you are because we've been planning this now for like 2 weeks, and there's a lot to talk about. This is like the moment because no matter what happens, this is 11-5 and the presidential race hasn't been done, and we both know no matter who wins, there's gonna be rioting in the street tomorrow. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
Well, I don't. Yeah, but I don't think the right is going to be rioting. If the left doesn't win, I'm pretty sure they're going to be rioting. I don't know about the right. I really don't. I really don't.
Okay, well, we're
I mean,
gonna
I
take
think
that.
that
So,
they're going to make strategic moves, but I think it'll be more, academic
well,
approach
we're gonna get there. We're gonna
uh,
touch on all the hot buttons of modern society. But let me ask you this, and we're gonna stop here with the racism and start with the history, right? So,
okay.
by both of your definitions, I want to sit there and say today, um, because I don't think today in a modern culture, right? And I want to say my generation and older, and I'm 42. Okay, um, my generation and down is not the same generation that we grew up in. And
What
I
can
keep,
you?
what's that?
We're baby boomers, right, Tony?
Yeah,
Well, I'm a baby boomer, 61,
Yeah, I
right,
just missed it.
1961.
I
Okay,
just
right.
what
missed
what is your generation, Chris? What's your Don
What
Gringo?
am
What's
I
your
X?
generation?
What am I Generation
Okay,
X?
Generation X.
Something like
Okay,
that.
okay. I just want
So
to make
I
sure.
was born in '78. I mean, I just had my birthday last month, so I'm 42. But regardless, so I look at the modern thing today, and I think that there's a lot of older generations that, they have the old hatreds that are in there. But when you look at society today, like I'm outside of Fort Hood, there are not that many people who are of a single race in this town. It's a military town. You travel the world, you find love all over. I mean, more children today are mixed than they've ever been, and the future generations are going to be worse. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is there really a future for racism?
I don't think it ever really existed. I think people have just used it strategically. Racism. I don't think it's ever really existed because I've never seen it when I grew up in California and when I grew up in Excel Springs, Missouri. Both places, I didn't see this racism. I think the media played a huge role in raising it up, and then the masses of the people latched onto it and used and figured they could use it for strategical moves, especially victimhood in the inner city.
Okay,
And you can
Tony,
get a.
let's get Tony. What do you think? There's a future for racism or what?
it. I kind of agree with what Will is saying. I don't think that racism ever existed. I mean, when you break down the word race, you know what I'm saying, according to how they would have you think about it, race is, I'm black, you're white, he's Hispanic, and so on and so forth. So if you want to look at word, racism, okay, everybody, that's why I referred to saying earlier, everybody is racist because, how else can you look at it?
Right.
But what is prevalent, you know what I'm saying, is prejudices, greed, that kind of thing, different biases from one group of people to another. But how I really look at it is people taking advantage of the situation. How would you think about it, Don Gringo, if you were consistently playing the victim role, consistently being helpless, and look at what they're doing to us, and versus a person, who's all not in the same boat, but they're trying to find a job or they're whatever society is giving them, whatever cards is dealt to them. At some point you get tired of that. You get tired of somebody playing the victim role all the time, and you want to say, "Hey, listen, man, get up off your ass and do what you need to do," instead of sitting back trying to, you know, get a pity party all the time. That's
Right.
how I look at it.
Pity party.
They
Well,
Yeah.
take
I think.
advantage of them.
Well, I'm gonna leave it at this. I don't think there's going to be any room for racism. Period. I think in the future generations, and God bless them, um, I don't think there's going to be racism anymore. I think what we need to do as a people is just stop labeling everything, right? And no, for instance, my wife is Mexican. She's a green card holder. When she gets naturalized, sure, she'll be a Mexican American, but she's naturalized citizen. She's not born here. And I think the problem we have is we've gotten away from an American culture where it's America, right?
Well, let me go on record right now and say this. I'm American. I'm not African American. I ain't, whatever. I ain't Chinese. I'm from America. I was born here. I was raised here, and I probably got a lot of roots because my granddad was Cherokee of the Cherokee Indian Nation tribe. And he was very light skinned, had green eyes, had that kind of hair, could lick his fingers and slick his hair back. So this is where my roots are, right here in America. So I'm American first.
Okay.
I'm of the color persuasion, but I'm American first.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you're saying that. I mean, more people need to think like that. And I think if we all started saying, okay, you know what, we're all Americans, but we live differently. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think also too, and we're going to get into the history because I really want to get into the history because schools teach us one thing, and we know it's definitely different, right? So we're going to get into that. But I think the problem here for society today, besides labeling, is stereotyping. I don't think people are really against a particular culture by nature. I just think they're against stereotypes, that they learn to hate certain stereotypes. And I think that's something that's been, pushed for too many generations, stereotypes that shouldn't have been, right? I mean, seriously. You can't be really mad at an entire culture. You can't be totally mad at an entire segment of society. I mean, it's like, how? I mean, I just don't understand that. It's not me being trying to be, I don't know, the white person trying to be, I'm all in this. I'm going to be the first one. You're going to teach me a lot tonight. I'm going to say, well, this is what I learned. And you're going to be like, nah, man, that's absolutely wrong. And I'm going to be like, okay, thank you. There's the ignorance part, but that's what you're taught, right? So I think one of the things is, I think personally we need to stop labeling. I think we need to stop stereotyping. And I think we need to have an American identity of some sort, which we don't have. Because when the crap hits the fan in this country, whether it was 9/11 or whatever have you, we tend to come together as a nation and come together fast, right? I mean, it's not something that you're prejudiced today or racist today, and then something bad happens, and overnight, I mean, it's like everyone all of a sudden is singing "Kumbaya," right? I mean, it's like, come on. Why can't we do this every day? I mean, you don't have to, love your neighbor 24/7, but you can sure the hell get along. So let's start with the history. So who wants to start with the history here?
I'll let Will go ahead and get in on it first.
Okay.
And I'll just listen. Because he seemed like he got a lot of stuff he want to get off his chest. So
Will's sitting there twirling that pen. He's writing stuff down. Woo, Will's waiting.
Well, now I want to make sure people understand it. None of us are trying to be experts on history or anything like that. This is based on our own experiences, and I think we both been through a lot in our community to be able to have some type of a viewpoint to share with older and younger generations, and even generations of our own level or whatever you want to call it. But I think that it's been advantageous for me because I've experienced both the liberal side of our community. A lot of people would refer to that as the civil rights movement aspect, and then the Black Power movement aspect, and now the conservative aspect. And this has been a bitter pill for me to swallow because it was easy to sit around and blame the white man for the system and blame everything else but ourselves. And then when we review African history and Black history, we always look at all the positive stuff that our people have done, all the positive stuff from the build of the pyramids, from the medicines in ancient Egypt, Ethiopia, Nubia, from teaching mathematics, sciences, everything that that are in history books that says that Black people, African people, whatever you want to label us, contributed hugely to civilization. So I was a big fan of that. I mean, I've read books such as Sheikh Anta Diop, Civilization of Barbarism, and I forget the other title one, the other one that he had, Tone. But Sheikh Anta Diop, Dr. Henry Clark, Dr. Ben, Ivan Van Sertima, all these African historians that have really painted a great history of Africa. And so that's what I've been dwelling on for the last number of years. Okay, but I come from the revolutionary side that essentially said we can use history, but we don't want to be stuck all in theory or ideology. We just want to say, okay, how can our African history contribute to our freeing ourselves from an oppressive society, current society? Because we are indeed an oppressed nation and everybody else is holding us back. Have we contributed? We contributed about this much to our own oppression, and the external pressures are huge. That's the impression that we get in the movement, okay? Whether it's in Tony's movement of the Nuwabians or not the Hebrew Israelites, but the five percenters, et cetera, from mine, dealing with
Nation of Islam, all of that.
yeah,